Dreamcatchers and my left. I don't know which way she is on your screen. Welcome back to the Dreamcatchers. We are so excited to be here today for a What's Your Story with one of our oldest and dearest friends who is a huge inspiration to us and to many around her. And we will have her introduce herself in just a second. But happy Friday, everyone, and happy weekend. And for those on the East Coast, happy almost spring, because all of a sudden we have amazing weather that we're dealing with this week, which has been amazing. Marissa, do you have anything you want to say quickly before we have LC introduce herself?
Yes, so I am enjoying my Phantom of the Opera sunlight that's happening right now, because I considered zooming outside, then I thought that was rude. So now instead I'm just basically sitting on the equator here. I said this a minute ago offline. I will share it here. This is our almost 50th episode, and it is without question a timely week, not only because Jamie entered the 40 club the other day, which it's okay because I'm in it, so there's nothing to be secretive about. And then in addition to that, we all have circled the sun. Speaking of her, she, we have circled the sun together this year in a pretty incredible way. And a year ago yesterday is the last day I worked in my office as a normal human being that I used to be. And I think our guest today helped me to transition in several important milestone shifts in my life. So, and I know she's done that for many, many people. It's probably, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, one of her superpowers, but here she is today marking that year together in a very important conversation where we get to celebrate that milestone together in a positive way. Because as she said this morning, we're entering year 2, and how are we going to be better, correct? How are we going to be better? So without much further ado, I mean, she needs no welcoming from Jamie and I, but go ahead, Laurie, introduce yourself to our audience.
Oh, you guys are so sweet. Hi, everybody. My name is Laurie Cole. I am the Founding Senior Master Instructor of Soulcycle, which is actually going to be celebrating 15 years next month. So we were working today on some of the anniversary stuff that we're going to be doing. I've been with the brand since October 1st, 2006. So a long time. I think it's the longest, well, I know it is. It's the longest job I've ever had. You know, I think in this day and age, everybody kind of bounces around and explores and experiments, and things are changing so rapidly with media and entertainment and everything that I've ever done. And so this is like the longest job I've ever had, and I never thought I would have lasted this long. So obviously I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me today.
I think I took my first class. I took my first class in March of 2007. So you were about, I don't know, 5 months wet in getting the brand off the ground. We had just come from a Justin Timberlake concert, and my friend, actually Jamie's friend, who is also my friend, dragged me across town to take this Laurie person's class at like 10 something in the morning, which in those days was early for me. And you know, in the city, you didn't go to different neighborhoods unless you had to, if it wasn't for going out, right? Like you went out in different neighborhoods, obviously, but you didn't like do a morning activity.
Well, definitely
back
not
then
for,
in a
not
different
for
neighborhood.
Fitness, not for fitness.
No, God,
no. Everything about, and it's funny. It all changed after that because of people like you, right?
Yeah.
And that I always think about.
Wait, can we just go back to the Justin Timberlake thing you said? Didn't we all go to a Justin Timberlake concert?
We all went to
we definitely have.
That was the hottest night of my entire life.
We did.
Wait, where were we?
We were at the Jay-Z concert, and it was the hottest night of our lives. It was the hottest.
Where was that? It was uptown.
Did we see it at Yankee Stadium?
Yes, Yankee Stadium.
Yeah,
the black tie.
Was
it the black tie?
150 degrees. 150 degrees. The black and white black tie tour. But what happened, I've never been hotter. I remember.
Speaking of equators, that was literally, it was 150 degrees that night for sure.
Literally 150. But I will say, Marissa said, she's been with Laurie since March of 2006. Weirdly, what's crazy is that as those who know us, Marissa and I do very little apart. And my two best friends were who took her to this class. And they would go and they do their thing on Saturday mornings, which by the way was at 10:45, which is not early for anyone. Marissa. And it's like close to
I'm not very timely, so it was a lot for me.
Close to 11 as you can be. But I remember feeling such FOMO, and I was like, why are my sister and my two best friends having all this fun without me? And I was like kicking and screaming, I'm never gonna like it. I hate stuff like that. All I want to do is go to a dance class. Like group fitness sucks. Like blah blah blah. And so finally, I was July of 2006, which, if you think about it, is a long time. 2007.
Yeah.
By the way, a long time if you think about it. That my friends were going to March. And I finally was convinced by July. I was like, fine, this is like, I'm done being left out. And, flash forward how many years later, Laurie was there she was one of the reasons I didn't know I was getting engaged. I got through both my pregnancies with her. And, now we get to take her class in my basement, which is kind of amazing. We'll get to all that. So our favorite first question, Laurie, I think I might know your answer, but I think it's fun to hear it anyway. We like to ask our guests their first memory of what you remember wanting to be when you grew up, when you were a little girl. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I think I always and forever has wanted to be a performer and an actress. And I don't know where was the actual first memory, but I do have an early memory of Lucille Ball in I Love Lucy, and it was in black and white on our TV, and I probably was under the age of 5, and I said to my mom, like, how does Lucy live in this TV? Like, what, she goes to bed in there? Like, what? Like, I don't understand. Like, how does she get out? Like, I want to hang out with her. And I just remember thinking, like, I want to do that. And probably I went to some show. I mean, I didn't go to Broadway because I lived in Los Angeles. But I definitely saw some pretty impressionable shows as a young person, but I just always wanted to be an actress. And I happened to be a semi-professional gymnast for many, many years, which is kind of where I honed the craft of like being diligent and driven and organized and fit and all those things that eventually now have led me to do what I do. I think everything in life kind of has a weaving in at some point, like everything, all those gymnastic classes and all those acting classes and everything that I do plays into who I am now, as it does for probably anybody who chose their career, right?
That's literally what we always say.
Yeah, you just took the words out of our mouth. That's what we always do. It's a fun little project that we try to deduce who you were at 5 and how that's applicable today. Because I think one of the hardest things for people, whether they're suffering from the noise of regular day-to-day job search or career fulfillment, or they're suffering from all that noise plus the noise that we've been currently living in, we forget to honor who we are a lot of the time. And if you just go back to the basics about who you were, who you are, what you liked, what you were interested in, you discover quite a bit about yourself.
Yeah.
If you just take a minute and pay attention. And it's a fun little exercise that we always do. I forgot about you being a gymnast. For some reason, I remembered you being a dancer. So
I was a dancer too.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the gymnast part, I should have known because I know you always like, I know you always pay attention to all the Olympic stuff. So, I think that's a great, from our vantage point, we always hire people or like to hire people or like to look at resumes that were people that were athletes.
Yeah.
From any generation and any season of career. When you see somebody was an athlete, you automatically know what their tenacity, dedication, and ability to commit to a project is. Right, James?
We say that all the time is that, especially if you are, I grew up as a competitive dancer, which I reference often, where there's something about that training and that commitment at such a young age of missing things and speaking of FOMO, constantly being at competitions on the weekends, performing for a crowd. And not just that, I think it's, so much of what you do now of motivating a crowd and connecting people and entertaining people. And that is something that when you are born with that innate interest and ability, it ends up coming with you somewhere. So yes, I am not a professional dancer, but I am a podcast host and a motivator and, a panel host, things like that now I'm talking in front of crowds on a regular basis, which I always wanted to do as a kid. And yes, I dance on the side and do fun things like that for fitness. But, I think a lot of that stuff, what you wanted when you grew up really dictates where you land. And if you can't see the correlation, we always try to kind of come up with that for people, especially when we're looking at somebody's resume, like, who are you? Like, what are your interests? Who are you in your group of friends? That kind of thing where you're like, oh, like maybe that is what I want to be doing, or maybe I need to think about that. And we will get to this, but before we came on air, we were talking about how fitness as a career was not necessarily something that we knew was an option when we were young. And now it's so prevalent, and you were way ahead of the game, as far as doing this for so long before everybody else. So that being said, okay, so you wanted to be you were a gymnast, you want to be an actress. Talk us through quickly, what was your first job? Like, what was your first paying gig? Like, what did you do for money for what was your first job that you remember?
I mean, I did what all young people do. I babysat and stuff like that. And then I went to college and I had to pay my way. So I was a concierge at this incredible resort called Broadmoor. And I learned from the ground up how to, be in a service industry. And then I ended up keeping that job after I graduated. I moved back to LA, which is where I'm from. And I started acting professionally. And I had that gig on the side. And then I fell into teaching indoor cycling at Gold's Gym in Hollywood, which in its heyday was like the place to take class, that and Crunch. And so I was like, oh, wait a minute, these classes that I'm teaching are paying my rent. Like, that wasn't even supposed to happen. And so then I started to invest more. It took me a long time to really figure out that your passion is your purpose, because I think everybody's so lost in figuring out what their passion is, but really you have to get quiet and figure out what brings you joy. And especially now, we've all kind of shifted and pivoted so dramatically in the last year, even though some of us don't think we've done enough. But I think that's just it. It's like, you have to get quiet and figure it out. And it's like, I was so busy being busy that I didn't realize I was honing the craft of what I was doing, and that everything that I was as an actor, and I still am an actor, but it's like my bread and butter is obviously Soulcycle, because it took a lot of energy to get this company off the ground. And then once you're in, it's like, you to keep your level at where you are in terms of success, you can't just phone it in. I mean, it just doesn't work that way in any business, whether you're a 10-year Harvard instructor or you're head of your CEO of a bank. You still have to be at the top of your game. You can't just phone it in. And I really appreciate women in particular who are kind of breaking that glass ceiling of leadership and being brave and being entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, as you were saying earlier before we went on. It's like, you have to really just trust the process, and that if it's meant to be, the work you put in will pay off. Like, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, even acting, I'm still like, hi, I'm here. Like, they're shooting Law and Order right outside here. I'm at my workspace, and I'm like, hello. Like, I get butterflies when I walk by the set. It's like that. I still want to do that, but it's taken so much like intense energy to do this. Like, you can't really kind of do it. It's either all or nothing. You get what you put out, right? It's like, whatever you do, let's say you're a musician and you only put in 10 hours a week, you're not going to be very proficient. It's just, where you put your time is where you invest your energy and your purpose.
So should I tell Sam that 45 minutes a week on his drum set is not enough to become a drummer?
Not gonna cut it.
Not gonna cut it, Sam. Granted, you're only 8, but you need to really hone your craft.
Wait, does he watch that girl in England? Nancy?
Oh my God, he's obsessed. We watch those all the time. She's amazing. And she's not that much older than him. I'm like, how do you think that she got that way?
She plays every instrument.
Every day. And she's like, she's amazing. She's like a savant.
She's incredible.
You know, you're hitting so many of the nails that we talk about so often. Obviously, we're all cut from the same cloth. We knew this before we talked to you and for years now. But, you know, you said that today during your ride, and I actually texted that sentence to a few girlfriends during the day about something unrelated, but obviously all related at this point, that your passion is your purpose. And so it's, you know, this is what we've been preaching to our candidates and clients for so many years, having, you know, now putting people to work now for close to 2 decades. And sitting with new grads and trying to figure out what they want to do when they, quote, grow up, and how to switch careers or how to get back to work after you've had your kids or whatever your circumstances are, is what is your passion? What are you good at? And if it's not like, okay, your financial situation may not allow you to kind of go after your passion, but finding those joys in your job, right? So if, for example, you are at a desk job and like, what are the things you do love? You know, is it, you know, you're good at numbers. And so that's how you figure out that you want to maybe be a buyer for Bloomingdale's, which you never really thought about the fact that you could do that with being good at math. So really,
I thought you were going to say Barney's and I was going to be like, RIP.
Yeah, right.
R.I.P.
Barney. That probably was a dream job for most of our listeners. Oh,
So sad.
So sad. I know I chose Bloomingdale's because I was like, what's relevant? What came to me. But, you know, I do think that you're 100% right there. And that's one of the reasons why Marissa and I started our podcast, is that one of our passions is talking to other powerful people who have an amazing purpose on this, you know, earth as to what they do for a living and how they inspire others. Because what else are we doing?
Well, and I think if I'm going to pick up, so some of our questions, we just have kind of, our customary script, we just kind of rolled into one just now, right? Like your aha moment for you in your career was, whoopsie daisy, I'm paying the rent in LA by riding this bike in a gym and working as a concierge. Although my heart still beats for acting, you know, my brain is starting pushing me through a different direction. Now, little would you have ever known the path that would have come from that, which is kind of mind-blowing if you really think about it. But, you know, you had that aha moment where you started to notice that you could feed yourself literally and figuratively in a fitness realm, which honored some of the passions that you always had. So even though you weren't necessarily acting all the time, you were still fulfilling your life. You're like a joy for yourself, which is a really unique position to find yourself in, because most people are not that fortunate.
Well, especially back then when I started teaching, which was 2000. And
of course,
all I did was take a weekend course by Johnny G to get certified for spinning. And nobody taught me like how to do it or how to talk on a mic or how to rally clients or any of that. And I think being a concierge, like I was so good at rallying people and communicating and like getting people excited about restaurants and trips and things and, you know, selling people on ideas. And I think I was like, no, I had no mentors, like 0 mentors. Like the people that were teaching beside me were doing this as like a side gig just for fun, you know? And I started to realize that I had a following from 2000 to 2006, like to walk away from that. I was a master instructor, you know, and to walk away from that was like the scariest moment of my life.
And you moved cross country.
And I moved across country with a guy that lived in New York who shall remain nameless.
R.I.P.
R.I.P.
Did you like today when I was like,
yeah, I did.
Have a song.
By the way,
just 3 songs on the playlist for your exes.
For the record, I know I digress and I don't, but I have to say, when you have always had the intuition, when you call my name, you always call me right when I'm struggling.
Robin said that today too.
Yeah, Jamie, keep going. I'm like, you're right. I'm sitting down, Laurie. Okay, you can see.
You can't even see me. But 2, I laugh. I have always been like, okay, so Laurie's funny. When she's on the bike, she's cheeky. I'm like, it's a thing, whatever. If you know, you know. But I, for whatever the reason, have always just been either because I sat right in the front. I just would always hear like the extra laugh. So like when you were saying it today, the first one, you're like the first song, and then you said second song. And then when you said the fourth, for some reason, I'm by myself in my basement. I like laugh guttural and like spit because it was like by the time she cuts off, it's going to be like the whole playlist. But it was just, I don't know. I heard you. So,
Thank you
and
for
I sit
hearing
there and I'm
me.
like, this is what this is all about. Laughing ridiculously by yourself in a
By myself.
basement with someone that you know you would be laughing with if you were right in front of them. So it still counts.
Well,
Also,
thank
can
you.
I just digress for one more moment for just a second, because it really made me laugh. So one of the things that Laurie always allowed us to do in her class when we were live, it wasn't every time, but often, was to do this like guttural scream, which, by the way, there's very few places, as we know, where you can scream at the top of your lungs and it won't affect anyone. Like maybe in your car, where Marissa and I do that sometimes with like the windows up and you just need to like, because if you do it anywhere else now, especially if you live in an apartment, it's you can't just scream like that. So today I thought everyone was out and Dave took Sam for a walk and I screamed like next level. She's like, give it a good scream. And I was just like I lost my mind. And then I felt the need to like woohoo after, just in case like anyone was upstairs and they thought I like myself. So I come back up and I say to Sam, like, how was Dunkin' Donuts? Like, blah, blah, blah. I thought they were gone the whole time. He's like, what happened to you? Like, what happened to me? Nothing happened. You needed to like let it out.
The primal scream, especially now. And by the way, I walk the streets of New York often without even thinking, is anyone around me? And I just go, ugh.
Like
Because,
loud.
how can you not do that right now?
Oh my God. I needed that so badly. It was so perfect. And then of course I scared the like hell out of all my people in my house. Whoops, sorry. It was really funny. It was a good one.
That's hysterical.
I wish I had it on video, but anywho, okay. So wanted to kind of now, we got a little bit your background, we talk about your title-ish, but just for the sake of like formality, tell us about what it is that you're doing now. What is your role within the company? Actually, before we even get there, how did you start? You moved across the country. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the brand and give us a little, quick overview. I know it's hard to go fast, but just a quick overview of how you went from teaching at Gold's Gym in LA and now being this, founding instructor of the biggest fitness brand in the world. I just want to understand how that even happens for someone. And then we can talk a little bit more about what you're doing currently, like a lot of the stuff that you've now done to pivot the brand because of COVID and et cetera. So give us a little overview of how that all happened.
So I think the Cliff Notes version goes like this. I was teaching for 6 years. I was a master instructor. Janet Fitzgerald, who is one of another senior master instructors at Soulcycle, had we were both teaching in LA at the time. And one of my very close girlfriends, Charlene, worked for her as an instructor. And I went to go take her class before I left for New York. And Janet owned this place called Body and Soul in West Hollywood with Tevya, her ex. And it was
I took Tevya's class once because of you. When I was in LA once, I went there and I took her class before I like at the very beginning of time.
Yeah, like Janet is she's been around a long time doing this, longer than I have. And I was taking a class. It was like, I don't know, Easter or something. And I saw this flyer on their desk and I asked Janet, I go, what's this? She goes, oh, it's the only freestanding spin studio in New York. I go, the only one? Like I was like, how is that possible? And so she's like, you should go. One of my old riders, Julie Rice, started it with a couple of other women. And it just so happened it was just opening. And so I was going to New York to visit the guy that I eventually moved here to be with. And we were, looking for apartments and stuff like that. And Soulcycle had been open for 2 weeks. And I walked in on a Friday morning at 9:30 a.m., which if anybody knows in the fitness world is prime slot. And 3 people were in the class. And Ruth Zuckerman was teaching. She was one of the original co-founders with Elizabeth Cutler and Julie Rice. And I took the class and I was like, oh my God, this is how I teach. Like it was a rinky dink, as you know, little space behind no signage on 72nd Street between Columbus and Amsterdam on the Upper West Side behind a juice generation, no signage, nothing. And it probably had like 28 bikes and no mats underneath the bikes, just wood flooring. And this big giant kind of like what we still have now of the empty road behind you in black and white mural. And so I talked to Ruth after class and I said, hey, I'm thinking about moving here. Do you guys think you're going to be hiring like, and she's like, I don't know. We just opened. It's not going that great. And I was like, yeah, I was like, I've been teaching for 6 years. I'm going to give you my number just in case something happens. And I walked out going, they're never going to make it. Like it was Friday morning at 9:30 and I was one of 4 people in class. And I was like, I understood kind of like the foundation that they were trying to build, but it was like bare bones, zero energy. Like I appreciated Ruth's like, vibe and her music. And I was like, oh, that's my music. And anyways, fast forward, I moved to New York and I'm here 1 week and I get a conference call from Julie, Elizabeth, and Ruth. Hey, Laurie, this is Soulcycle. And I'm like, hey, how are you? And I'm thinking, because I gave them my number. They're like, listen, the 3 people stopped by this week asking if you teach here. And the last person who stopped by, which was a friend of mine who was starring on a as Johnny Cash on Broadway, said, is Laurie Cole teaching here? Because she said she moved here. We can't find her. And they're like, do you have her number? And so they
like pre-social media, they're like, how do we find this woman?
Yeah, but the truth of the matter is that the irony is I had given Ruth my number many months before. And like a good, that was April, May, June, July, August, September, 5 months before. And on that phone call, they hired me without ever meeting me or anything. They were so desperate for new energy. And simultaneously, they had hired Stacy, like literally weeks before me. I didn't even know Stacy had moved to New York. We were both teaching a mile apart from each other for years. Stacy had been teaching, I think, 10 years, and I'd been teaching 6 years. And Janet had been teaching at that point about 10 years. And
I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to give some texture because for people that might be listening, I think it's really important to say, okay, so back in the day, fitness started on the West Coast.
Totally.
East Coasters did not understand fitness.
Spinning was a thing in LA. That's why,
Yes.
like, if you were going to Stacey Griffith's class, my class, or Janet Fitzgerald's class, even though we didn't know each other per se, and because we were all teaching at the same time across town, that was like the place to be. That's like where you went from the club, especially like the gays, it's like they went out all night, stayed high, and got on the bike. It was like, and then all of a sudden it turned into wellness because it was a way for people to get
It was exactly that. Fitness came from partying, right? It was a totally. West Coast energy. On the East Coast at that time, you belonged to big gyms that were social driven spaces. And also there was a lot of yoga, but the mentality between yoga and the big gym was such a far divide. And there was still a lot of outdoor sports happening. So socially in New York, you would do like softball or all this interesting stuff. And you'd run and you'd run. So there was really, and there was kickboxing was the only thing in the East Coast that was kind of a thing at that time. But also in addition to that, you're realizing that here you have these tremendous personalities with these well-known followings, but this is before social media. So if you happen to know Laurie Cole's class, you knew it either from traditional PR, like a magazine article,
by the way, that
organically from mouth. Like,
by the way, so, that is how Lindsay discovered Laurie, because she read about it in Daily Candy.
Oh my God.
R.I.P. Daily Candy. She read about Soulcycle and was like, she was a big fitness person, still is, and was always looking for like the new hot class. And she was the one that would like discover the cool class at like Equinox, and you have to like go do your trial so that you could get your week so you could try that one. And then, we've all done, I have done all the things. I was like maiden name, middle name at New York Sports this week so I could try this class. And we were doing all that craziness.
Doing like pole dance, like you're doing every single boot camp, running up and down stairs.
And Lindsay was trying all those things. And she was like, that's how she found out about Soulcycle. She's like, I heard about this boutique spin studio. And at that time, you were like, what is spinning? Like, you're just like sitting on the bike, you go nowhere. Like, and I remember that was why I was so resistant at first, but Lindsay was, that was
and that's what I mean. Like for anybody that is not, you know, from the world of before social, you need it. So you open up a space, you have this big idea, right? You had to get a couple of hits of marketing. The Daily Candy, which is an RIP for anybody that doesn't know, was an email distribution list with hot items like a Zagat, actually that's a bad reference too, because that's also not something people know. It was basically like a who's, where's, buys guide for anything that was hot right now, where Instagram, we can find that by looking up anything. We didn't have anything like that. So if you made it onto Daily Candy, you made it. So, yeah. And you made it to anybody's inbox that would be somebody that you would want as a customer. Right. So that was really how, you know, Laurie moved to New York, right? And they're looking for her phone number. Like people are walking into this place and like, do you know Laurie Cole? I mean, that's the way, how funny is that? That's the way the world was. You didn't know. If you knew the person, you knew the person, but you wouldn't know how to get in touch with them unless you had their number. Plus their cell phone was like a StarTech flip phone. We weren't taking pictures on it. So there was no documentation. Anyway, I didn't mean to get off topic, but it is really important to showcase how the brand and you were built here, because what we take for granted today did not exist, was non-existent.
Well, it's much harder to get exposure, and it's also much harder to be kind of the it thing, right? I mean, it's New York City. You know, it's very intimidating to start a business. And on this phone call, I said, what do you mean somebody gave you my phone number? And I knew who it was. I said, Ruth, I gave you my phone number when I was there like 5 months ago. And the other girls on the phone are like, Ruth, what? I was like, I was there. I took like the first week or the second week. I can't remember. It was like very, very new. And they're like, can you start tomorrow? And I said, okay, I can start tomorrow. They go, we just have 2 rules. And I was like, okay. They're like, we hear you like to swear, no swearing, and no hip hop. And I was like, okay. And in my mind, I was thinking, I'll play that game for a minute, but like, that's not going to be able to fly, because that's not who I am. Like, I'm not going to change who I am to go teach at a spin studio that has 10 people. So, you know, it was a very slow build. And I say this a lot to like the younger generation that works with us who, you know, as talented as they are, they want it yesterday. And often what I preach is that everything worthwhile takes time, and you have to hone your craft. And we started with 12 people, and 12 turned into a solid 24. And then we got more bikes in the room, and we brought people close together, which also RIP riding close together, because like, what were we thinking? Can you imagine the germs in there? And you know, you were there in the early years. Like it was a hustle. And like, I remember one night before our first big snowstorm of winter, and it was supposed to be like 3 feet of snow on the Upper West Side. And I said to Julie the night before, I don't think anyone's going to come. I'm not going to trek all the way up there. And she goes, if we don't stay consistent, they won't start coming. And it turned out that day was a sold out day, because there was a snow day for school, which we don't have anymore because everybody does everything remotely now. And so that class was sold out. And we realized that people really needed Soulcycle in their lives, not just for fitness, but for their mental, you know, and spiritual well-being. And it was mostly women in the early days. And I was really the first person to kind of get men in class. And so it was really just Stacy and me and a couple of other people who kind of floated in and out part-time. And then we started hiring, you know, people, and a lot of them are still with us. Ayana, being our first Black female instructor, she's still with us, and she's freaking fantastic. And Kim Perfetta was with us for a while, and then she left. Now she works for Alpha Plus. And, you know, slowly but surely, we didn't get any guys to teach for us. And then, you know, within the first 5 years, we had really expanded, and we opened a bunch of studios, not a bunch, like 5. And it was a slow, hard build. I think for 2 years, I didn't have vacation, like at all. And it was the true definition of a startup. And then the third partner, Ruth Zuckerman, who was the only talent on the team in terms of teaching talent, decided to leave. And that was very complicated and contentious. And I think the remaining founders realized, like, if we don't make Laurie and Stacy partners, like, we're going to lose the business, because it's a talent business, right? It's not a tech company. It's not a candle company. It's not a t-shirt apparel company. It's a talent company. And so that's when we kind of became part of the business. And I was already, I feel like when I do something, I'm always in, you know what I mean? I'm the one cleaning the toilets, even though you didn't ask me. And it's like, I pay attention in details. I'm like, I always, and maybe I will be, I always thought of myself like a director brain, like a film director. Like, I kind of see all the nuances and the details and things. And I think the details matter. And I think the experience matters. And maybe that's the concierge in me. But I was so insistent on making this successful that I literally poured everything I had into it. And I was actually getting a lot of acting jobs at the time, because I was the new face in New York, and a lot of these people came to Soulcycle, and I got hired for a lot of gigs.
I remember that. You were very busy.
I was very
busy at that time.
Yeah.
And by the way, we just for texture, another texture piece, we as your students knew you very well at that time.
Yeah.
Well,
we were all living in Manhattan and hanging out.
We were all living in New York. We were all living a very similar lifestyle. You were new to town. So your students a lot of your students were your friends, because that was the community you were building.
And still are.
Yeah, and still are. And, I think it became, through the years, of course, we've heard so many different ways to describe Soulcycle, right? But it was, for me, it was every place I had never belonged wrapped into one that I belonged to. Yeah. And I would go religiously, and probably, ironically, as people follow their teachers, sure, through the years, I know, as you guys grew, we were there. I was part of the party that tore down the wall of 72nd Street. I was there when the Tribeca studio opened. We were really part of the growth of the business. And I think for entrepreneurs like Jamie and I are, we really emotionally connected to its growth. Like we felt it.
Well, you all felt ownership over it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. We really did. I talk about this a lot with, obviously I preaching to the choir. I'm sure Laurie has so many stories about this, but like, the new classes that would, the new class of people, meaning like the freshmen that would like come in and like be like, have you tried Soulcycle? I'm like, oh, I'm an OG. Like,
yeah, but that word OG gets thrown around too.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
What kind
I'm
of
like
OG?
a real, like when I've gone to other studios, like
I'm not sure it's a compliment anymore.
Yeah, like, but I'll say I'm actually like, so like I went in Austin last year, and I was like, when I was in Austin, I'm like, I'm an OG, like a real OG, like a real one. And so I'm like, I like introduce myself to the front desk. I'm like, just take care of me. But I do think, like Marissa was saying, it became such a part of our fabric. So Marissa's saying that she was doing it because it really brought her a community that she never felt like she had. For somebody like me who grew up on teams, it was this thing that I felt and
familiar.
Yes. And I was a sorority girl. And, so here I was in the city, just kind of floundering for my space. I was volunteering. I was like trying to find my thing. And what Soulcycle became to me was like my community, my place that I connected. There was a time there probably for 5 or 6 straight years where I took Laurie's class Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, every single week, sometimes Tuesdays. So 3 to 4 times a week, every single week, only Laurie. I was like, only Laurie. I literally, people were like, try this on. And I did, you look at my history, you might see 1 or 2 or 4 others, but most of the time, only Laurie. It was our people. It was our gang. I talk about this all the time to people. I'm like, you would walk around the city. If you saw somebody in that OG Soulcycle sweatshirt, like the original merch, you knew them. You were like, oh, hey, because there's only so many.
You shared an experience with somebody at a time that was really special.
It's true. It's funny. I was thinking about, rather than wearing a jacket, I was going to wear. I have.
Me too. I was going to wear my first sweatshirt too. Yeah.
it's just not that flattering in this moment. But that's
It was
it's not
like the
important.
old school, like oversized zip up. They got way cuter over time, and I
Yeah.
have it still. I still own it, obviously.
So I mean, granted, of course, we could talk about the brand, and we can talk about the candle, we can talk about the scents, we can talk about the merch, we can talk about the people and the hiring and the growing, the growth, and the the millions of locations, not millions, but a lot of locations. But that's not really, that's a story that's been told before. What I'm here today is to showcase my friend in her way, where it's like, okay, so here you are, a teacher, right? At your heart, you married teaching, fitness, your ability to rally a crowd, some of your side hustle into your job. And now 15 years later, you were now part of, as you were saying before, you became a partner. And then, of course, we all know, you'd be living under a rock, that obviously the partners sold, or however you might want to say it better than me. And you're still standing and part of the corporation that is now backing Soulcycle, and part of the reason why we can take you in our suburban homes, which unfortunately or fortunately happened through the journey of our friendship and our loyalty to Soulcycle. I've always been loyal to Soulcycle. My life just didn't allow me to be as loyal as I would have liked to have been. So tell us how your job has changed. Tell us about how you have continued to shift and grow within your own position, and tell us maybe some unexpected joys as you've rounded the curve in the last year. We know the woes, but what are some of the joys?
I think a deeper understanding of why Soulcycle is so important in people's lives. And we always kind of knew that. Obviously, we had people like you who were dedicated, once a day, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, whatever. But that we were their life force. We were their touching point. We were their anchor. We were their ability to go, okay, this is something that I still have in a time that is so uncertain and broken, and where we all lost everything that we identified with and was our identity. But we needed something that made us feel secure and safe and find joy. And, the pandemic really leveled the playing field and allowed us all to realize, like, your health is really all that you can control, because there's so much we can't control. But if you are well, you won't get as sick. If you get sick with the virus, you will recover quicker. You will be able to survive, and you will be able to thrive. And I think we all lived in an insurmountable amount of fear, which I think we're going to be unpacking for many years to come. And we'll realize that places like Soulcycle, listen, Soulcycle would have never survived had it not been for the clientele base. Like, that's just the truth. We didn't even shift into online this live project that I helped create until August. And I started working on it with another person in my office in March. Because I was like, I can't just leave these people hanging. I felt like a responsibility. Like, I was worried about people's mental well-being, like especially the ones that come once a day. They use it as the anchor
as
to
therapy,
kind of like in a survival mode, not just like vanity mode, like survival. And so I was really worried about a couple of people who I know were really intensely committed, not just to me, but to the routine. And I thought, this is going to unravel very quickly if we don't reach out to these people. And we owe it to them. And they are our people. And we've all worked a decade and a half for this. You can't just let it die. Like, and it was really the community of teachers that rallied and said, you know what, we need to do this. Like, this has to happen. And also for our mental well-being. Like, imagine me, it's like, I get up every day, I create playlists, I have to hold myself accountable, I have to take care of myself, I have to look good, feel good, you know what I mean? As soon as you took that away, it was like, well, then what's my purpose? And so there was a real reckoning. I think in every business, it was like, well, what's important and why? And I think we doubled down on the why. And now it's like this trophy brand, which was a trophy brand before the pandemic, became acutely aware of that piece of the puzzle that people need in their daily lives to feel safe and sane and healthy. Because everything else you can fix, right? You know, people lost jobs, they lost friendships, they lost, you know, homes, but they had their Soulcycle. And it was like, okay, everything's going to be all right. Like if I can just ride in Laurie's class, like virtually even. And then we opened up in July outdoors. And we were one of the first, I think, to do it in this type of a way with the headsets and the big tent outdoors. And we didn't even know what we were doing. We were just like, let's just do it. A couple of my colleagues are like, hats off to them for figuring it out, because it wasn't easy. And we opened in the Hamptons and we were like, let's do it. And then we opened in the city in August, and we basically been open every single day ever since, even in, you know, 15, 20 degrees. And it's been tough, but I don't even remember what your question was, but
I think, yeah, I don't either. But you know what I think we were talking about some of the small joys, right?
Oh,
So
small joys is just like being able to stay connected and accountable and like doubling down on your purpose.
And you know, like, I hate to bring this up, but you know, it's a natural conversation point here is, you know, I, having been such a loyal Soulcycle follower, and then we were in Hoboken, we were still coming into the city a couple times a week to take class. But when we moved to the suburbs 4.5 years ago, you know, that changes things for you in a lot of ways. You know, I had to find new ways to exercise, new people who inspired me, which I have done, very, you know, slow burn, but we figured it out. And I was very resistant to change that way.
That definitely had a downside after that many years. It did.
It made me angry. It made me angry. It made me grumpy. It made me, you know, I think a lot of people probably resonate in this way. If you move far from the city and from Soulcycles, you know, and then I was so grumpy because Soulcycle opened across from my apartment in Hoboken, which Laurie knows, Marissa and I were big advocates for years before it actually happened. And then we left and it opened and we're like, of course it did, like directly across the street. And by the way, I always say to Marissa, we wouldn't have liked it anyway because Laurie wouldn't have taught in Hoboken.
No, we would have, I mean, cheers to you, Hoboken, but we would have been in the city anyway.
I was always would have come in the city.
You would have been getting on that ferry to go to Tribeca anyway.
I say this with love. I was a squatter in Hoboken. Like I lived in Hoboken, but I was a city person.
Yeah, we were
squatting. Everyone knows that about me. I am who I am. Sorry,
Marissa. That's hysterical. I'm a
squatter in Hoboken that really wanted to be in the city. That's what we always say. And so, you know, I moved here and I was very resistant to an in-home experience. I think that the pandemic has shifted a lot of people's perspective, and admittedly bought a Peloton at the beginning of the pandemic because actually right before your bike was not out yet. All of my friends had a Peloton. So I was like, the community thing, like maybe I'll enjoy it. And I will say this, I love it. And I love it because of Laurie. The reason why I'm able to enjoy spinning and can self-motivate is because I've had Laurie's voice in my ear for, you know, over a decade. That I fully believe that. And I'm able to enjoy the experience. And then now that I can take her class at home virtually somehow, is a huge bonus. So I have an in-home bike. It's not the Soulcycle bike. So
it does add a little bit of sex appeal, doesn't it? You're doing something a little bit.
I'm like doing something a little, but like so are so many people.
You're being naughty over there.
Yeah, I'm being a little bit naughty.
It's a little bit naughty.
Laurie from my Peloton, sorry. But I do think that I'd love to hear from you a little bit about the at-home bike. That came out, I remember it was announced like right at the beginning, literally like this week, if I remember correctly. It was like right now. I do know a lot of people that have gotten it since.
It's a great bike.
Yeah, so
it's an awesome bike. I mean, that's the difference between the Peloton bike, aside from the fact that my ex-boyfriend made the Peloton bike.
Right.
God, I've left so many ex-boyfriends in my path. So the at-home bike, the Soulcycle at-home bike, we filmed the beta version about 2.5 years ago. And it was just going to be, we were going to own the bike. We were going to do it. Once we realized how much it was, Equinox came in and said, we'll buy it from you. But we're going to wait to launch it because we want to have all these other modalities that we own. Now, Equinox is owned by a company called Related, and they own Pure Yoga. They're investors in Rumble. They're Precision Run. They own Blink, so there's all these other modalities and fitness kind of places that they own, and they wanted to put them all on this one particular app. And the bike was obviously going to be the anchor, right? Because the bike is the biggest cost. It's not so much the $40 a month or whatever it is. So we had to wait till they were ready. And I had filmed actually that original beta. We shot it in New Jersey. And I was like a co-producer on there, and I helped cast it and was there every day. And it was like, I wanted it to feel like Soulcycle. And I started to see that, it was a very produced version of us. And even though it was our people, to me, it resembled more so like, something that would happen in a stage, in a sound stage, instead of like, what ended up happening was the pandemic happened. And I was like, we have 99 studios. We have 400 instructors. We can keep everybody safe. You go in there alone, film, we'll get all the camera equipment set up. We'll film live classes and everyone can stay employed, and we can do this around the clock, 24 hours a day from every major market and every major time zone, including London. And this is a way to keep people employed. And also you can connect to people because like we already had the sound system, we had the lighting, it was scrappy, but I was like, let's do it. So it was right around the time the bike was launched. And unfortunately, the timing of it with the pandemic, obviously, if they had known, they would have rushed it before the pandemic and we would have probably sold way more bikes, but like, you can't predict that kind of stuff. And I think in the end, it gave us a nice runway.
You couldn't predict that the world was going to shut down for an entire year?
Yeah.
There are some things I can control, but that was not one
that
of
was
them.
not one of them.
But I think in retrospect, it gave us a nice runway to kind of work out the kinks. Because we are already a major brand versus when Peloton started, nobody even knew the word Peloton. And so they could spend a lot of time working out the kinks. And let me tell you, technologically speaking, there's a lot of kinks. It's not just doing what we do, which all of the talent on this particular platform are the best, and if we could have everybody from every market, we would, but COVID didn't allow us to travel and go set up in other studios. And it still doesn't, because you have to quarantine, and there's a lot at play here, music rights. And so anyways, long story short, it ended up being a success because people wanted the authentic version of us. And that was what happened in the studio, which is the magic. And you can't really create that so much on a soundstage for various reasons. And so people really bought the bike for the live classes, and not to diminish the on-demand classes. I think they're great. It's just different. And I don't think you can kind of duplicate the same essence or ethos of what the brand is in a produced thing and have it be the same as what people know. And I'm talking about like the Soulcycle people that have been riding for years and years and years, that were probably the first ones to buy the bike even.
Yeah.
There's
definitely something to be said about that. And by the way, we could talk, I could talk about this. I could talk about this for way too long, actually. But the truth is so the way the Peloton inserted itself into my life, I didn't care for it because I wanted to be at Soulcycle, which conjured up those feelings that Jamie described, which, for lack of a better word, it was angry. It was just a feeling of like, why is this part of my life over? I didn't sign up to have a piece of me be done just because I chose to leave Manhattan. Like, you know what I mean? And the thing is unfortunately, there's a lot of great fitness where we live, because we live in a beach community. So there's a lot of great things happening here. But unfortunately, we were very spoiled by our experience. So even though Jamie's able to finding joy easier than I am, shocking. But she is, where for me, I really struggled. It took the pandemic for me to subscribe to my Peloton. I had it for 2 years and it collected dust. Dave used it.
Wow.
I couldn't do it. I would go outside of my house for fitness. Then the PS is because they couldn't do their live classes anymore. and they were just alone in their studio that way, I was able to emote because I couldn't deal with the whole thing. So it was such an interesting thing. But for me, when I was able to take you and actually, and I don't even know, I probably would have had the same amount of emotion without a pandemic. To have a slice of my life given back to me
The
that
familiarity.
I can take when I want to is like a priceless
Well,
gift.
yeah, it was an investment. You don't want to give up on your investment. You didn't sign off on that.
No, it wasn't it was not my fault that I couldn't go anymore. It was like, and I think that was, the hardest transition piece. But I have very much enjoyed being able to have you at home. It is exactly what you're saying it is. And I'm speaking to anyone that has not had the good fortune to try. It does give you a slice of the magic. I mean, there's nothing like being in a full class in Tribeca, or, in your home studio. We used to go to NoHo too. But like in Tribeca in the morning with a coffee afterward, there's a vibe that you cannot, but that's also not the life we're living right now. Right. So, and I'm not even living that life if I wanted to be living that life. So if I can get Laurie Cole in my basement for 45 minutes, 2 times a week, and feel that connection, that's awesome.
And that's why the live stuff really resonates for people. I think
it really does. It's important.
People want a piece of that.
It's not only that, it's connecting to you. It's connecting to their memories. It's connecting to foundation. It reminds us of accountability. It reminds us to show up for ourselves. There's a lot of it. The Soulcycle culture, also for those of you that don't know, was very formative in creating solid habits of dedication to oneself. So you couldn't go to class unless you signed up at 12 o'clock noon. You could not be part of what you wanted unless you planned your workouts.
I actually said this time. I said this time and time again. I credit Soulcycle's cancellation policy for my fitness in my 20s and early 30s. Because if you did not cancel by 5 p.m. the night before class, you lost your money. So it was like why I went half the time, because I was like, oh, shoot, I forgot to cancel. I got to go. Like, it's not a question. You weren't going to lose $30 or whatever it was at the time. Like, you were still.
Which now everybody has adopted, right? All of boutique fitness.
Oh, 100%. Every boutique gym has done that since. And I always say this, and I will say this to Laurie and to anyone. Soulcycle was first with all the things. Every single thing. Most places emulate Soulcycle in some way, whether they think they do or not, whether they even realize they do, from having a hair thing at the front, a mint, gum, the whole experience, the way it smells in there, the whole experience from the minute you walk in to the minute you leave, that has now been replicated so much. But it really, you heard it here. It started at Soul. But when
By the way, were you when it was Sunday at noon?
No, we were only Mondays at noon. I don't think.
The signups used to be Sunday at noon.
Was it? Oh my God. That's really OG.
They had to fix it because the like Wall Street people, their assistants didn't work on Sunday.
Oh,
so
yeah.
They had to get
we need to do this during the workday. Okay, so
I have a question.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm going to say what Jamie's going to say next. So you've hired so many people. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about hiring.
We just described you're fundamentally responsible for allowing people, I'm giving you that credit. The Academy Award goes to Laurie Cole, for creating a career option for many humans, the generation behind us, to enter the workforce wanting to work in fitness without it being, shall I use the word, stigma. Now it is actually a career professional where you could be in marketing, operations, licensing with the product and the music. I mean, it's a real full-blown business.
Career path.
You've hired hundreds. I'm putting words in your mouth. I'm assuming you've hired hundreds of people. You personally been part of a hiring process.
I mean, I think it would be more honest to say, like, we did it.
Yeah.
Right. None of this happened alone. Like, this was, pieces of the puzzle that came together as it did. Like, at the beginning, we were very scrappy. We would audition front desk people. Like, Jenny Gather worked at the front desk and she auditioned for me and Julie, you know, and I remember, you know, the words that were said when she walked out, and like, I really took those people under my wing. Emma Zacks, member String. And so there was, and even Claire, who has since passed away, like there was a select few that we did this non-traditional kind of training thing. And yes, I was part of many of those auditions and informal training and semi-formal training. And then when it became like a real training thing, my strength was not in the day-to-day training of them. It was like once they got to a certain point and I could nurture them. So I can't really take credit for that because I didn't invent that. It just, you know, Janet came, I think, year 4 and really turned it into a professional kind of thing for us, because that's what she did for her own business when she had the business in LA. And she created a training program, which has evolved and is still evolving. But we've hired hundreds, and in the pandemic we lost some, and that's you know, the natural weeding out process of any business right now. But I think the experience that we all brought to the company, the decades and decades of experience, really mattered. And even if people didn't know it, they were learning from the people who created opportunities without having to have side gigs. And really, Soulcycle, like you said, to your point, created a place where you could have a career in fitness. Whereas before it was a side hustle. You didn't have health insurance. We were the first people to give health insurance. Like, I remember Julie and Elizabeth gave it to us for free because they realized, like, should we insure her legs like J-Lo? Like, what if something happens?
I remember this.
Yes. They were like, how do we, you know, I remember we were researching how to insure our legs, because the truth of the matter is, like, we were holding up the business because without us traveling to the Hamptons, going to LA, you know, doing all these things.
Right. There's no marketing department if there's no talent. Right. Like, if you're not going to classes,
people are coming there for the teacher. That's just the truth. And that's the way.
I mean, I think it's a talent business, and it took a while for the company to figure that out. And now that they have, it's like, it's a little more cohesive, but it's, you know, it's not easy running a talent business that is based on fitness and wellness and creativity and motivation. And so, you know, you're all those things to all the people at different parts of their lives. And it's a huge responsibility, but it's also like a great honor, right?
How do you stay inspired through everything?
So many people ask me that when I do interviews. I think it changes and it morphs. I think what inspires me is staying active and in front of people. So I have to get sleep. I have to eat well. I have to treat myself well. I have to know when to pull out of a situation if it's too much, so that I have energy to push myself back into it. I'm very good at creating boundaries. I did that very early on. And I also have a life outside of Soulcycle. You know, so in a lot of ways, Soulcycle is like my baby that I never had, but I also have a life pre-pandemic, of course. But, you know, we're all figuring it out. It's like what you love can kind of take over your life in a very unhealthy way as well. So I don't know if it's one particular thing, Marissa. I think it's just, you stay inspired by watching people transform and like staying alive. And like, you know, a lot of people are getting divorced right now, and they happen to just be coming to my class because they need that kind of moment to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And a lot of the best ideas that I've ever had have happened on the bike. So I know it happens for others too. And also just seeing people through their journey. It's like, listen, it's a responsibility we all have. Like, you can't just come in and press play. It's just like, there's massive amount of preparation. There's massive amount of recovery. And discovery, as you know, because I talk about that a lot on the bike. So I don't know, every day it's different, but I enjoy being relevant. I enjoy being a part of, you know, the thread of somebody's life. And I enjoy the opportunity to receive energy. Like, I need that. I wouldn't be a good hermit at all. I would be so depressed.
I 100% have always felt that you and I shared something. I heal when I heal others.
Yeah.
So that is 100%. Bless you. Yes. So when I am taking care of someone else,
it's fulfilling.
in a boundary that works for me.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll insert that. When I am nurturing, when I am helping someone else, I heal myself.
Yeah.
So I have always admired feeling that from you, because
Mhm.
I have watched you teach not only your students, me being one of them, but the junior staff of teachers through the years. I mean,
Yeah.
I know, who you mentored or who became Laurie's, on the bike.
Oh
And
yeah. Oh yeah.
or subscribe to your way of thought. You've always been somebody that promoted self-care.
Yeah.
You talked about self-care before I knew what that
Before
was.
it was cool. Yeah.
Yes. And I have this article, I have this email. I was going through all of my old, whatever. I've been cleaning out a bin that's been like, I don't know, the bin, every time I clean it out, it seems to grow. I don't know what goes on in this bin. But I
because you're a Cancer. You can't get
yes,
like
I'm
me.
hoarding all of my old
I'm
sentimental
hoarding
memories.
also. Yeah.
I wrote an email to you, and I'm not going to read it now, but I will. I'm going to text you a picture of it. I wrote an email to you on New Year's Eve 2009. Which
Wow.
2009 was a really crap year for me. But I wrote this email to you, and I think it will be mind blowing for you to reread.
I would love to read it.
I cried when I read it, because you realize just how integral your peace.
Oh.
So from me, who I believe you also lead with a lot of empathy. We say all the time, leading with light is super important. We don't always understand a lot of people on their decision making right now.
Yeah.
We
Right.
really don't. But
Yeah.
if we can continue to show up and be our best versions of ourselves in whatever we're doing, and we continue to lead with empathy and light and forgiveness and a degree of sensitivity, then then we're doing our part, right?
Mhm.
So, and I believe now, again, this is a question that we usually ask. What do you think your superpower is? I mean, other than the 75 I just said you had.
What is my superpower? I think my superpower, honestly, is being able to understand energy and how to manipulate it. And when I say manipulate, not in a negative way, but it's like the arc of a Soulcycle class, right? There's the warm up, there's the pop the party, there's the soulful moment, and then the cool down, right? It's this arc. And I think you have to know how to read people's energy to know when to push, when to pull back, and I'm a very, direct human being. Like I just don't believe in fluffing somebody's feathers if it's not worthy or if it's not warranted. Like I'm not going to say to you, you're doing great when I know deep down inside, that I know you're not. And that could be anything. I don't mean like the way you ride. I just mean in everything. And so, I try to remain truthful, but I don't know if my superpower is so much telling truth as it is knowing when to show it. Because I think you have to earn people's trust, and I think you have to be consistent in their lives, right? For them to really honor their own self. So if they can trust you, then they can trust themselves. And so maybe that is one of my superpowers. I'm very energetically connected like you. And I believe in the human spirit. Like I know people can pull themselves out of horrible situations. I have seen miracles and witnessed them for the last 15 years. And then, 20 of my professional or 21 of my professional teaching career, which is mind blowing. But I think when you do something a lot and you do it often, you get really good at knowing how to manipulate things and people and even yourself. Like I'm still, figuring it out in a lot of ways because the world's changed, right?
The landscape's different. That's
You
for
know,
sure.
Yeah.
I think, I love that you just said that about yourself as your superpower. I think we believe that everyone has something that they bring to a relationship, to a situation that not everybody else could bring ever. And there's something super unique about what Laurie brings to her classes, to anyone that's ever come in contact with her. We said that in our caption on social media, but we mean it. I mean, it's so you know, Marissa and I always talk about our superpowers with people, and it is, I do believe that we all have one. We just may not know what that
what
is.
it is.
But I think, you know, with that, we always also ask, which I could laugh at this question for you, because you have so many what we call Laurie-isms, right? And they've changed over the years.
Write that down.
Write that down. And she'll say it because she wants to remember it as she's teaching and forgets. But there's so much you say, and obviously so much of what you do when you're on the bike is inspiring others and to keep going and keep riding, but also keep living. And you have so many things that you have said over the years as quote mantras that we always say, you know, do you have a mantra? I mean, Laurie probably has 50 mantras.
But to be fair, when she's on the bike, she's scrolling.
All of her mantras.
All of her mantras. In case, oh my God, that was a long scroll. But I will say this, I know she and I have connected on this. When she's on the bike, like when I'm doing something, when I'm spiritually connected, I don't always remember what I say. Which is such an interesting thing, because when you're channeling energy, you don't always, your brain is not really there. You're a vessel for the energy. And Laurie definitely has that. There have been many times where I'll say something right after. I think social media probably helps you, because if someone tags you in it, you're like, oh yeah, like deja vu. But I think, in all fairness for you, there's probably been a lot of things that you've said out loud on the bike, and if you were given $1 million 5 minutes after, you'd have no idea you said it.
Right.
So we start off with lipstick, and we ended, I'll see you when I see you, and everything that happened in between, who knows what happened?
Who knows?
Right? That just means you have to be open to it.
Yes.
You have to be really open to receiving.
So tell us, what is your current LC, like current mantra? Like,
that you
what are you saying to yourself to get up every day? Because, by the way, it's a lot to carry, what you're carrying right now.
Well, I'll tell you some things I've learned, that confidence doesn't always equate competence. I think there's a lot of false confidence out there, and, you know, which is fine, but it feels very bubblegum, right? It's not who I want to be. It's not who I want to follow. I said today, and I had already written it down, that if you don't recognize your power, how can you, exercise your power? So I think that's a superpower. Like, you have to be able to recognize your power and not feel shame over it. And I think anybody who's been doing anything for a long time, like us, sometimes you get shamed for your success. And that comes from the shame of the person that can publicly shame you, but not publicly apologize, So it's a complicated thing these days. I think you have to really trust that you're being truthful, because if you're being truthful, you don't have to make any excuses for who you are.
I think one of my favorite Laurie-isms, if I can say, there's so many, but one of the things that Laurie always used to say, I don't know if you say it as much anymore, but that resonates with me, is nothing ever changes if nothing ever changes. It's one of my favorite Laurie-isms.
Unless you change it.
Yeah. Like nothing's going to change unless you change it. Like, you got to change it. And we say that so often to our listeners and our followers, you have to go after your own destiny.
I love her so much.
I know, I love her so much, but like, you have to go after your own destiny.
I just had a moment by myself in my own head. I was like, I've cried in that classround so many times. I'm like,
oh my God.
She's like, well, when we started this, and we're wrapping now, Jamie will ask you our favorite question, especially for someone like you who has this brand that you're part of. But, we started this from an intuitive place of need, where, Jamie worked in a corporate experience. I never did. I've always worked in a scrappy experience. I must say this on air. There is a moment that Julie and Elizabeth, I know, would remember, where they offered me, I took a meeting with them, and I thought I was helping them with their staffing. And instead they offered me their HR position. And I looked at them, and first of all, I was wearing a blazer. I still have it, by the way. And when I was done with the meeting, I noticed that, the security tag that looks like you shoplifted was still on the blazer during the whole meeting. So I was not only flabbergasted that they offered me a position, but also humiliated that they thought I stole. So,
my God.
that's not relevant to the point. But the point is that I remember the place for those two reasons. But they offered me a position to be their HR manager. This is an
Wow.
old school story. And I was like, I don't have any of those skills, like at all. But Jamie does. Jamie did. And I said, I'm like, I'm a salesperson. Like I can recruit, I can sell, I can fill the staff, but like I don't know anything about HR other than the fact that I know what kind of people you want in here. Like that's it.
Yeah.
And I have thought about that conversation in my professional life.
Wow.
I don't know, 1,000 times, if not 2,000, because you just don't know where your path and how your choices will shape you. And, you know, in retrospect, I was very happy. I remember walking out off that happened, but also very flattered and excited. But I also remember thinking, this is my safe space.
Yeah.
I don't know necessarily if I want to work there. I want to be part of it. I want to contribute to it. I want to believe in it, but I don't want to be there every day. And that was a very important life lesson for me.
So
very
smart.
important that I think about, you know, and like I said, I don't have a lot of mentors. I'm self-made, right? So, you know, when we put these podcasts together, we were interviewing people that I now consider my personal or professional with Jamie board of directors. So, you know, you are 100%. It took us like 40 something guests to get you. But I mean, if I could, I would have started with you one, right? Because in all fairness, if I were to count the people that have kept me sane or managed me up or held me accountable or challenged me or healed me or pushed me, you would be one of them. So, you know, thank you for being on my board. I really appreciate it. And, you know, I'm glad to be able to say that to you publicly because I've said it to you privately, but a public acknowledgement of how important your teaching has been in my life.
Thank you so
is
much.
so significant. So, Jamie, you want to end? Now I might cry a little.
Isn't that such a Marissa Jamie moment? It's like same, like echo whatever she said. No, I mean, obviously Laurie knows this, but I couldn't agree with Marissa more. And I did work in a corporate. Hi, Gypsy.
Gypsy just popped in. Sorry.
Oh my God, I've never seen that dog.
Yeah, she's new.
She's new to the party. Say hi.
That's Gypsy.
How old is she?
She's 5 months old.
Oh my God.
She just started at Soulcycle 5 months ago. She has a white vest.
She's not an OG, yo.
She's not an OG.
Okay, so our favorite kind of last question. I mean, you probably have so many that you could say, but you know, Soulcycle. Let's just pause here. One of the things that I have done, a passion project of mine as part of the Dreamcatchers and Choice, has been what I'm now terming the Brand Crush Project, which is a trademarked foolproof method as to how to land your dream job, which is something that I now teach. And one of the things that I always implore people that are looking for jobs to do is really identify their brand crush. Like, what companies do you think are just killing it, and can you work for them? And if you can't work for them, can you work with companies that work with them, etc. And so I literally often, I mean, when I give this spiel to people, Soulcycle is my original brand crush. It is 150% the brand that I thought was doing all the things right from the very beginning. And even in transition and change, you know, I was able to still connect to, and that is largely because of you. Because I think that one of the things that stayed consistent for me, even in all the changes, every studio that opened, there was always Laurie. Like I could always just like take a Laurie class. It didn't matter how big the company had gotten. I could still walk in, and that experience is the exact same thing that I experienced in 2007. Right. So that is a really big compliment, really big compliment. No, but really big, you know, revelation that I've had as I've gotten older and more in my professional career, that is something you cannot really replace, is that brand experience. So, you know, I always ask this of my guests, but this is a tough one because of who you are and where you work, is, you know, do you have a brand crush? Is there somebody that you think, you know, I follow you on social, so I know the companies that you think are doing really amazing things and where you go and where you spend your time. But do you think, whether pandemic related or not, but maybe pandemic related, just because we love to shout out other brands that we think are doing something really amazing right now. Do you have any brand crush that kind of keeps you motivated and inspired and, you know?
It's funny. I am very attracted to brands that are generally small or smaller, and that I have some type of connection to, maybe the founder or owner or whatever. And so a couple of brands that I've been really loyal to and then developed really amazing relationships with. One that comes to mind right now, but not so much pandemic, although it was always a part of my pandemic story, is Lord Jones, which was started by a husband and wife, Cindy and Rob Rosenheck, out of LA, and they own a marketing, they're from New Jersey, and they owned a very successful marketing firm, and they turned in this CBD formula company into this like multi-$100 million brand. And I reached out to them and I said, I want to make a Soulcycle like CBD cream, like in the grapefruit scent. And so they flew and like it took the company a long time to like trust me. And then finally I got them in a meeting with the founder, and they were like, sign us up. And it was the single most successful retail item we sold to date. That was that grapefruit scented CBD cream from Lord Jones that was made for us. And
Is that still available?
It's still available. It doesn't have the Soulcycle wheel on it, but it's just the grapefruit scent, which is, you know, and I was a part of that whole process, how to choose which scent, how much grapefruit, what did the packaging look like? I really, I really get off on like doing projects like that. And even like
I still have some of those original Soulcycle grapefruit candles in my house, like the original. Yeah.
That project was a project Julie Rice did with Jonathan Adler. And that's still available. And then, you know, I have like little things that are done by bigger companies, but I was one of the first Lululemon ambassadors in New York City.
And I remember when I went and saw your picture and I was like, no way. Like that was like a really big deal to be an ambassador at that time, like a big deal.
Yeah, and all the Lululemon employees were brand new, and they all got to ride for free because that was our exchange. You would help us build the company, you could ride for free. Anyways, long story short, fast forward before the pandemic, about a year and change before the pandemic, they flew us up to Vancouver to go to the mothership of Lululemon, which I still have a lot of friends that work there and are you know, part of the executive team, and we got to design a collection, me and Ayana, for Soulcycle. And even though Lululemon is a major brand, I had never been to the mothership, and it's like going to like the campus of Google. I mean, it is like, it is a well-oiled machine. And I happened to be there, I'll never forget it, on International Women's Day. And,
oh, I love that.
And so they had a whole like thing going on, you know, and they gave gifts and cards and everything. And I was like, this is so impressive. But, you know, with those big corporations comes big responsibilities. But, you know, we spent 3 days there working in the I think the White Lab it's called, which is a room, well, it's like a dungeon going down with a bunch of scientists. They have like 80 scientists that work on their product. And so we created a whole collection. And then we shot it in New York, probably a year later after they made the collection, and it sold out on the first day. So like, I felt really kind of proud to be a part of that. My name wasn't on it, but it was, you know, designed by me and Ayana and the team at Lulu. So that was kind of cool. I've always had a brand crush on Lulu because it's obvious they were the pioneers of kind of that apparel that made it chic and cool to not just work out in, but to walk around in. And
I mean, thank God for them, right?
Thank God for them is right.
Thank God
still
for them.
Swear by my Wonder Unders. Still swear by those.
Yes.
I still have my original pair.
You know, I'm really into aloe yoga for apparel. Like that's my jam as my body has changed as I've gotten older. And you know, I just like anything that's a little more groundbreaking. Like for me, Glossier was chic and cool, but it wasn't organic and you know, good for you in that sense. And so like Victoria Beckham Beauty does all clean branding and shipping. And so a friend of mine, Sarah Creole, is the CEO of Victoria Beckham Beauty, and I really love the brand. They let me kind of test out all of the product before they created it and sold it to the to see how it would, you know, hold up on a workout, because women who wear that work out. And it's just so great the way that they ship in the boxes, in the plastic, and the plastic disintegrates because it's not plastic. All you have to do is run it under water. Everything
I love that.
Readable, and it's all clean makeup, you know, every part of it. And so I really, I enjoy being part of the story of something that hasn't been done or is new. And I love to help it grow. And a smaller local example of that would be Laughing Man, my coffee shop that's co-owned by Hugh Jackman, and my friend David and Cece. And it happens to be in the neighborhood I live in, and it's doing phenomenally. Like, they've expanded, and I bet you they you know, kind of branch out beyond New York City. But I love brands like that they're doing something cool and innovative and different and keeping it small. You know, I think that's the only thing I would have done different, is to keep it small. And the whole idea of bringing soul to the people, which I think is a great idea, is that sometimes it dilutes the product, right? Like, it's hard, like you were saying before, to duplicate the experience. And luckily we've had so many talented instructors that were able to keep the integrity of the brand alive. But that doesn't always work in other brands, you know?
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
You lose that specialness. Like Rag and Bone, for instance, the owners who used to ride with us, David, who's married to Gucci Westman, she has the Atelier beauty line that's on Goop. Like, as soon as they sold, like, I really had no interest in Rag and Bone. Like, it just became kind of like run of the mill, you know, like, you know, and my friend who owned Intermix, Haro, same thing. It's like the buyers were different, and then it just became more run of the mill. And I just was like, eh. And then I became a little more awake, and I wanted to support brands that were actually making a difference, not just in a monetary way or capitalistic way, but actually giving back. Like Laughing Man gives back to the community that makes their coffee and pays people for what they're worth to source the coffee beans. That's important. It's very important. And I don't buy fast fashion anymore. I try not to. I think vintage is where it's at. And I like to, you know, be conscientious. I don't drink out of single use plastic anymore. And so I think all of these things kind of add up to this. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, you have to make a difference in order to make a difference. And I'm attracted to brands that are making a difference. And maybe there'll be more now that the world's opening up, I'm sure, because New York is going to change. There's a whole generation of people that don't even know the things that have closed because they weren't here. And they're going to create their own path. And it's going to be really cool and amazing. And real estate won't be as expensive. And so maybe it'll bring back the artists and what New York was really about, which is kind of exciting.
525,600 minutes.
I can't wait for Broadway to open.
Oh, by the way, I heard that today. You're like, do you remember you said that? I was like, I wooed at that.
What was the last?
I wooed at that too.
Before lockdown.
What
was the last Broadway show you saw before lockdown?
We saw, what was our show last year that we saw? Was it Mean Girls? No, wasn't Mean Girls. We saw something after Mean Girls.
We saw American.
I was supposed to see Moulin Rouge in March of 2020 for my birthday last year, and I didn't get to go, which is really sad. And then they I think honor our tickets at some point. But we saw Ain't Too Proud, which is Jersey, not Boys.
Love
Temptations. Oh my God, so good. Like, not Jersey Boys, like Temptations. There it is.
The anti-Jersey Boys.
Yeah, the anti-Jersey Boys.
But the other side.
The other side.
Well, Laurie, this was such a pleasure, and
Marissa,
I'm so happy that we were here with you today. Thank you to A Shared Universe for our sound, and a
special cheers to our city, your adopted city now. Thanks for keeping the soul and the lights on there. Yeah, I can't wait to come back and see her grow and change. I like what you just said. I like what you just said about the new people that will come in and create a version of New York that it will revitalize and do its thing all over again, and that's okay. And I really would like to focus on that rather than what's been left behind, because the truth is a lot of the things that were left behind, or a lot of the things that we lost, we needed to lose anyway. So I'm looking forward to coming back into the city regularly. I would love to take a live class outside.
Yes.
Timing it right where I can maybe wear a layer or two less.
Yes, we're getting there. It's been beautiful.
We're getting there. And until then, I mean, we'll just see you when we see you.
See you when I see you.
I love you both so much.
I love
Laurie.
you too. Thank you for spending this time with us.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.
Bye. Happy weekend.
Bye.